Hello and welcome. Welcome back to CNN News 18's continuous coverage of Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to India. We've been tracking all the developments for you here. Russian President Vladimir Putin is in India for his 2-day state visit, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has set the tone by personally receiving him at the airport, a rare protocol break. The two leaders shared a warm handshake, a hug, and even rode together before a private dinner at the Prime Minister's residence. Prime Minister Modi also gifted Vladimir Putin a Russian edition of the Bhagavad Gita, saying its teachings inspire millions, a gesture underscoring the cultural warmth as both sides now look to reset ties for the future. Today, the spotlight shifts to diplomacy and business. Vladimir Putin will receive a ceremonial welcome at Rashtrapati Bhavan, visit Rajghat, and then hold delegation-level talks with Prime Minister Modi at Hyderabad House, followed by interactions with India's top corporate leaders as well. As you know, there's lots on the agenda when it comes to the relationship between the two countries. We are also potentially looking at a no-limits partnership between Russia and India. Of course, it remains to be seen what sort of strategic autonomy and strategic deals are on the agenda here and what sort of breakthroughs we can expect and bilateral agreements that come out of this very crucial visit. Let's talk about why India and Russia click. A crisis-born trust. Russia supported India in 1971. Kashmir vetoes and Cold War crisis defense routes are at the heart of this very important relationship. More than 50% of India's military equipment is Russian origin. Civilizational affinity, old civilizations with independent worldview and shared distrust of Western hegemony. These are some of the elements that have brought the two nations together. They both hold long memories of Western pressure and sanctions. Energy and pragmatism at this point continue to dominate this relationship. Now, discontinued Russian oil, India secured its energy needs. The China factor is also an important element, and India is a major ally for Russia beyond Beijing. However, what sort of complexities that dynamic adds to this relationship, that is something that people will be closely keeping a watch on as well. Today, there are several bilateral engagements and delegation-level talks which are planned for Russian President Vladimir Putin. There you can see the visuals on your screen as well. For more on this, we're now being joined by Michael Rubin, Senior Fellow, American Enterprise Institute from Washington, D.C. Also with us is Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat. Thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Rubin, let me come to you first. Of course, when we talk about strategic autonomy and the special and privileged strategic partnership with India and Russia, how will they exercise this policy of the strategic autonomy and increase their ties going forward? Especially, a lot of other global players are going to be keenly watching this visit of the Russian president to India as well.
The question which India needs to ask is whether this embrace of Russia is because Russia is the best strategic choice, or whether part of it is out of animosity at the way that President Donald Trump has treated India. I would argue that Donald Trump is a lame duck. What he's done with India is inexcusable, but pushing the United States by reaction into a stronger embrace of Pakistan isn't wise. I also worry about the future of Russia, whether Russia is going to make good on its military agreements. It didn't in 2023, and what happens when Vladimir Putin dies. Ultimately, I think what India needs to do is recognize that India has to upgrade its own defense industry rather than rely on any outside power.
Absolutely. India's focus has very much been on strategic autonomy, and these are all strategic relationships, to which I would like to now also come to you, Ambassador. Of course, let's talk about what Mr. Rubin has said. What is your assessment of this?
Well, I heard with great interest the remarks of Mr. Rubin, but let me point out that contrary to what he said, it is not India that has driven the United States closer to Pakistan. The United States has, for its own reasons, been drawing closer to Pakistan, despite the fact that it raises concerns in India on a variety of issues. Now, let me mention that Mr. Rubin very rightly said that India needs to indigenize its defense industry. And that is what we are trying to do. We have this program of Make in India, and we are trying to strengthen our defense manufacturing capability. Now, there are certain problems which President Trump has himself created for India. Indo-US ties were going absolutely smoothly. They were on the right track. We were very keen to enhance these ties and develop them. But then, out of the blue, he imposed 50% tariffs on exports from India and called India a dead economy. So there was a lot of bad language used, which naturally upset people here in India, not just the leadership. Now, what is the way forward? Of course, India will pursue strategic autonomy. Of course, India wants good relations with the United States, but also with other players.
Right.
Now, with Russia, we have had good ties for a long time. And we have an interest in keeping these ties alive. Of course, there are risks we run. For instance, increased defense purchases are likely to attract adverse attention of President Trump. There is also talk in the US media about CAATSA sanctions, which were waived for India when India first went in for the S-400 missile
Right.
anti-defense system. There are risks in the relationship. But these risks have to be taken because President Trump is mounting so much pressure on India that certainly it puts us in great discomfort.
Right. Mr. Rubin, let me just bring you in there as well. We are also somewhat seeing a sort of geopolitical realignment here. Would you say that's true?
I would say, certainly India is keeping its geopolitical options open. But all I'm saying, and I share the frustration of the ambassador, is Donald Trump has a 35% approval rating. That means he has a 65% disapproval rating in the United States, and it's not clear he's going to be able to finish his term. What I would lament is after 25 years of building up U.S.-India ties, if out of animosity towards President Trump, who is a limited factor, we actually set our relationship down a path of non-cooperation for decades to come. Prime Minister Nehru and President Truman weren't able to come to accord, and that pushed the United States into this alliance with Pakistan. Now, where I actually disagree with the ambassador is that no one understands what Donald Trump sees in Pakistan. Pakistan is a terror state. It's a failed state. And perhaps Donald Trump was bribed. Perhaps something else is going on. But ultimately, this is where India can rely on Congress. And India should be calling people like President George W. Bush and Barack Obama, both of whom were instrumental in building up the relationship, to come to New Delhi and to show Indians that Donald Trump doesn't represent all Americans. He's an anomaly. He's not the permanent face of the United States.
Mr. Rubin, you rightly said Donald Trump is a limited factor here, and India understands that very well as well. When we talk about the relationship between India and Russia, there's historical and cultural context to that also. That being said, are you hoping for any major breakthroughs during this visit of the Russian president to India? What would you be looking out for?
What would be very nice would be if Prime Minister Modi would assume the rightful place of India on the world stage and perhaps use his good offices to mediate between Russia and Ukraine in a much better way than someone like Donald Trump is capable of doing. India really underperforms on the world stage diplomatically, and I lament that because India could be doing far more if it realized just how positive its reputation was and how it can bring so many disparate states together, the United States and Iran, Russia and Ukraine, and so on and so on and so forth.
All right, noted. We hear you now. Ambassador Dayal, let me just come to you on that question as well. How do you view the evolution of the relationship between India and Russia in the backdrop of what is happening between India and the United States and, of course, the war in Ukraine as well?
Well, I would like to evaluate first the historical evolution of the relationship between India and the United States, which would help us to better understand the evolution of the relationship between India and Russia. You know, India and the United States are natural allies. We are both democracies. India is the world's largest democracy. The United States is the world's oldest democracy. We are both multicultural, multiracial, multi-religious. But unfortunately, what was happening when India became independent was that the US was emphasizing either you are with us or you're against us. India wanted to pursue strategic autonomy. And that is why India became a major player in the non-aligned movement. Now, the United States misperceived it because, as I said, its view was either you are with us or you're against us. So non-alignment was perceived by the United States as hostile. That drove India towards Russia because the United States
All right.
was strengthening its relations with Pakistan, including defense ties, which were being cultivated with dictatorships like that of General Ayub Khan. And all this was harming India. So India developed closer relationship with the Russians
All
because
right.
it needed to offset the dangers which were developing on account of the Pakistan-US
All right.
relationship. Now let me carry on just by one or two other points. Mr. Rubin said that we must realize that Donald Trump is a lame duck president. How do we factor that in? It is for the American people to decide who is effective in their foreign policy establishment, who is not.
Right.
He said we should reach out to Congress. The Congress has been powerless because these 50% tariffs which have been imposed in India and which are hurting our exports as also our economy have not happened with any sort of congressional
All right.
intervention, as the president has done, and the Congress has failed to do anything. So we have to factor in our own
All right.
geopolitical independence and pursue strategic autonomy, which we are trying to do.